Craigslist, a digital marketplace where you can buy, sell, or trade just about anything. For some, it's a treasure trove of bargains. For others, a gateway to experiences they'd rather forget. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Tonight, we're diving into 3 chilling true stories from Craigslist that will make you think twice before hitting post. Grab a blanket, turn off the lights, and let's get started. Story 1. The Sofa Sale. It was a quiet suburban evening when James decided it was time to tackle the task he'd been avoiding for weeks. His upcoming move to a smaller apartment left him with no choice but to downsize. Among the many items he needed to part with was a sleek, leather sectional sofa, an extravagant purchase he'd made years earlier but barely used. James wasn't the type to sell things online, but Craigslist seemed like the most practical option. With little experience on the platform, he created a simple listing. Luxury leather sectional sofa, like new, $1,200 OBO. The responses came quickly. Most were unserious, lowball offers and vague messages promising to come by tomorrow with cash. But one email stood out. It was from a man named David. David's message was polite and direct. He said he was furnishing a new home and was eager to see the sofa. His tone was reassuring, and James felt confident enough to arrange a meeting. They scheduled the visit for the following evening at 7 p.m. The next day, James spent the afternoon preparing. He vacuumed the sofa, wiped down its leather surface, and tidied up his living room. By 6:45 p.m., everything was ready. As the clock struck 7, James positioned himself by the window, waiting for David to arrive. But the minutes ticked by, and the driveway remained empty. By 7:30, James began to wonder if David had changed his mind. Just as he considered giving up, a pair of headlights illuminated the street. A sedan pulled into his driveway, and 3 men stepped out. James immediately noticed something unusual. David, a man in his early 30s with a friendly demeanor, seemed approachable enough. But his companions, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a shaved head and a wiry, sharp-featured individual, hung back, watching the house with an unsettling intensity. "Hey, sorry we're late," David called out, walking toward the front door with a sheepish smile. "Traffic was terrible. I hope it's still okay to take a look." "Of course," James replied, though unease began to creep in. David gestured to the 2 men behind him. "These are my buddies. They helped me move today, so I figured I'd treat them to dinner after this. Mind if they come in?" James hesitated for a moment, but didn't want to appear rude. He nodded and stepped aside, allowing them all to enter. The atmosphere inside the house changed almost immediately. David's friendliness remained, but his companions were silent, their eyes darting around the room. James noticed them lingering on his bookshelf, his television, and the framed photos on the wall. David approached the sofa and ran his hand over the leather. "Wow, this is even nicer than it looked in the pictures," he said. "No scratches or anything. It's in great shape," James replied, trying to keep the conversation light. "Hardly used. Mind if I sit on it? Just want to make sure it's comfortable." James gestured for him to go ahead. David sat down and nodded approvingly before standing and inspecting the sofa more closely. He said, frowning. "You know, there might be a problem here." James tilted his head. "A problem?" David pointed to the corner where the 2 sections of the sofa connected. "Right here. It feels uneven, like the frame might be bent or something." James stepped closer, confused. "I've never noticed that. It's always been sturdy. Could you come here for a second? Just feel it." "It's right here," David said, motioning to the corner. Reluctantly, James leaned down to inspect the area. He was so focused on the sofa that he didn't notice the wiry man creeping up behind him until it was too late. In an instant, James was slammed to the floor, the wiry man pinning him down with surprising force. "Stay still," the man growled, pressing a knee into James's back. James struggled, but his resistance was met with more force. The tall man leaned down, his face inches from James's. "Don't fight," he said coldly. "You'll only make this worse for yourself." Meanwhile, David began moving through the room with a chilling calmness, rifling through drawers and cabinets. "Grab the valuables," he instructed. James watched helplessly as David pocketed his phone and wallet. The tall man moved toward the entertainment center, unhooking the television while the wiry man emptied the bookshelf of anything that looked valuable. "What do you want?" James managed to stammer. David glanced at him briefly. "We're almost done. Just sit tight." The entire ordeal lasted less than 10 minutes, though it felt like hours. Once they had what they wanted, the three men made their way to the door. "Thanks for the sofa," David said mockingly as they left. James lay on the floor, stunned, until the sound of their car speeding away jolted him back to reality. He scrambled to his feet and surveyed the damage. The living room was a mess, drawers pulled out, cushions tossed aside, and electronics missing. He grabbed his landline phone and called the police. An officer arrived shortly after, but there was little they could do. The email address David had used to contact James was fake, and the phone number was disconnected. "You're lucky it didn't end worse," the officer said gravely. James nodded, but the weight of what had happened lingered. In the weeks that followed, James found himself double-checking every lock on his doors and windows before going to bed. The memory of being pinned to the floor and the violation of his home haunted him. Craigslist had always seemed like a harmless way to buy and sell things, but now it felt like a dangerous gamble. He deleted his account and vowed never to use the platform again. James's leather sectional, the centerpiece of his living room, was gone. But what he missed more than the sofa was the sense of safety he'd once taken for granted. If there was one thing James learned from the experience, it was this: no deal is worth sacrificing your security. Story 2. The Truck Trap. It was a chilly autumn morning when Eric first came across the Craigslist ad. He wasn't actively looking for a new vehicle, but his aging sedan had been acting up lately, and the idea of upgrading had been on his mind. The ad seemed almost too good to be true. "Pickup truck for sale, $3,000 OBO, runs great." The truck, a mid-2000s Ford F-150, looked pristine in the photos. Its glossy red paint gleamed in the sunlight. The tires were new, and the mileage was surprisingly low. For $3,000, it felt like a steal. Eric hesitated for a moment. He'd heard the stories: scams, shady deals, and worse. But the thought of owning a reliable truck at such a low price overpowered his caution. He reached out to the seller, a man named Rick. Rick responded within minutes. He seemed friendly enough, explaining that he was moving out of state and needed to sell the truck quickly. "It's in great condition," Rick assured him over the phone. "I've taken good care of it, but I can't take it with me. If you're serious, I'd be happy to show it to you." They agreed to meet in a grocery store parking lot that afternoon. The public location put Eric at ease. He figured there'd be plenty of people around if anything seemed off. When Eric arrived, the truck was already there, parked in the far corner of the lot. Rick stood beside it, smoking a cigarette. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, dressed in worn jeans and a flannel shirt. His appearance was unremarkable, but there was something about his eyes, a cold, calculating sharpness that made Eric's stomach twist. "Eric?" Rick called out, waving as Eric approached. "That's me," Eric replied, extending a hand. Rick shook it firmly, his grip lingering just a moment too long. The truck was even more impressive in person. The paint was flawless, the tires were brand new, and the interior looked spotless. "You weren't kidding," Eric said, running a hand along the hood. "Told you," Rick replied with a smirk. "She's a beauty, isn't she? Go ahead, take a closer look." Eric walked around the truck, peeking under the hood and inspecting the engine. Everything seemed in order. "Mind if I take it for a test drive?" he asked. "Not at all," Rick said, tossing him the keys. "But the parking lot's not the best place to get a feel for it. There's a quieter spot just down the road where you can really see what she can do. Follow me and I'll show you." A knot formed in Eric's stomach. The idea of leaving the safety of the parking lot didn't sit well with him, but Rick's suggestion seemed reasonable enough. After all, a test drive on city streets wouldn't give him a real sense of how the truck handled. Against his better judgment, he agreed. Eric followed Rick's beat-up sedan down a series of winding roads, the busy streets gradually giving way to more isolated stretches of pavement. With each turn, the surroundings grew quieter and more desolate. The occasional farmhouse or roadside business disappeared entirely, replaced by dense trees and overgrown fields. Finally, Rick pulled into a narrow dirt path leading to an abandoned lot. The area was surrounded by thick woods, with no sign of another soul in sight. "Here we are," Rick said as he stepped out of his car. Eric hesitated, his hand hovering over the door handle. Every instinct told him to leave, but he brushed off his fear as paranoia. He stepped out of his car and joined Rick by the truck. "Take it for a spin," Rick said, gesturing to the open space ahead. Eric climbed into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel. The truck started up smoothly, the engine purring like a well-oiled machine. He drove in a wide loop around the lot, testing the brakes and steering. It handled beautifully, but as he circled back toward Rick, something felt off. Rick was no longer standing by the sedan. Instead, he was pacing near Eric's car, glancing inside. Eric pulled the truck to a stop and stepped out, his heart racing. "Everything okay?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Rick didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward Eric with a slow, deliberate stride, his hands clenched into fists. "What are you doing?" Eric demanded, his voice rising. Rick smirked. "You shouldn't have come here." Before Eric could react, Rick lunged at him, slamming him against the side of the truck. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and he struggled to push Rick away. "Give me your wallet," Rick growled, pinning Eric against the metal. Eric reached for his back pocket, his hands trembling. He handed over the wallet, hoping compliance would de-escalate the situation. But Rick wasn't finished. "Keys too," he said, nodding toward Eric's car. Eric hesitated. "Please, just take the wallet and let me go." Rick's eyes darkened. "Keys. Now." Eric had no choice. He fished his car keys out of his pocket and tossed them to Rick. The man caught them with a grin, then turned and began rummaging through Eric's vehicle. Eric's mind raced. He considered running, but there was nowhere to go. The lot was surrounded by dense forest, and Rick's car blocked the only exit. He thought about fighting back, but Rick was bigger and stronger. After what felt like an eternity, Rick climbed into the truck. "Pleasure doing business with you," he said mockingly before speeding off, leaving Eric stranded. Shaking, Eric stumbled to the dirt path and began walking back toward the main road. It took him nearly an hour to reach a gas station, where he borrowed a phone to call the police. When officers arrived, Eric recounted the entire ordeal. They took his statement and began their investigation, but their findings only deepened the mystery. The truck? Stolen. The keys Rick had handed Eric? Fake. And the email address and phone number Rick had used to communicate? Both disconnected. Eric never saw the truck, or Rick, again. In the weeks that followed, Eric couldn't shake the fear that lingered from that day. He replayed the events in his mind, kicking himself for ignoring his instincts. The memory of Rick's cold eyes and the suffocating silence of the abandoned lot haunted him. Craigslist, once a harmless marketplace, now felt like a predator's playground. Eric swore he'd never use it again, no matter how good the deal seemed. His story serves as a chilling reminder. If something feels too good to be true, it probably is. And no amount of savings is worth risking your life. Story 3. The House Cleaning Nightmare. Anna had always been a hard worker. After years of scrubbing floors and organizing homes for a professional cleaning service, she decided to strike out on her own. Craigslist seemed like the perfect place to advertise her skills. Within a week of posting her ad, she had already booked several clients. Most were friendly and grateful, and the jobs were uneventful. Then came the message from Mark. His email was polite, almost overly so. He explained that he lived in an older home on the outskirts of town and needed a deep cleaning after some recent renovations. Mark offered to pay more than her usual rate, promising cash upon completion. Anna hesitated for a moment. Something about the tone of his message seemed a little off, but she ultimately agreed. The extra money would be useful, and Mark's house was only a short drive away. When Anna arrived, the house was exactly as he described, old and isolated, nestled at the end of a long gravel driveway surrounded by thick woods. The property felt like it had been forgotten by time. Paint peeled from the siding, and the windows were covered in a thin layer of grime. Anna parked her car and approached the front door, her cleaning supplies in hand. Before she could knock, the door creaked open. Mark stood there, his tall frame filling the doorway. He was in his late 40s, with thinning hair and a pair of round glasses that reflected the gray sky behind her. "You must be Anna," he said, his voice soft and measured. "Thank you for coming. Please, come in." She stepped inside and immediately noticed how dim it was. The house smelled faintly of mildew, and the only light came from a few scattered lamps. The furniture was sparse and outdated, and boxes were stacked haphazardly in every corner. "Sorry about the mess," Mark said, motioning to the clutter. "I've been meaning to get everything sorted, but you know how it is." Anna forced a smile. "That's what I'm here for." Mark gave her a quick tour, pointing out the areas he wanted her to focus on: the kitchen, the living room, and the upstairs bathroom. "If you need anything, just let me know," he said. "I'll be around." Anna nodded, unpacking her supplies as Mark disappeared into another room. She started in the kitchen, scrubbing the counters and wiping down the cabinets. The work was straightforward, but the house's eerie silence put her on edge. As she worked, she became increasingly aware of Mark's presence. He wasn't in the kitchen with her, but she could feel him nearby. A creak in the floorboards here, a soft cough there. It was as if he was hovering just out of sight. When she turned around to grab a rag, she saw him standing in the doorway, watching her. "Oh," she exclaimed, startled. "I didn't see you there." Mark smiled faintly. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. I was just checking in. You're doing a great job." Anna forced another smile, but her unease grew. "Thanks. I'll let you know if I need anything." She moved to the living room next, vacuuming the worn carpet and dusting the shelves. Mark followed her, standing quietly in the corner as she worked. His presence was unnerving, but Anna tried to focus on the task at hand. At one point, he asked, "Do you usually work alone?" "Yes," Anna replied without looking up. Mark nodded slowly. "That must be lonely." Anna didn't respond, pretending she hadn't heard him. She quickened her pace, eager to finish and leave. As the hours passed, Mark's behavior became increasingly strange. He began asking odd questions about her family, her schedule, even where she lived. When she tried to steer the conversation back to the cleaning, he would change the subject or fall silent, only to resume watching her. By the time Anna reached the upstairs bathroom, her nerves were frayed. The small room felt stifling, and the sound of her own breathing seemed unnaturally loud. She wiped down the sink, trying to block out the unease that had been building all day. Then she heard it, a soft shuffling noise just outside the door. She froze, her heart pounding. "Mark," she called out. There was no response. Slowly, she opened the bathroom door and peeked into the hallway. It was empty, but she could feel that she wasn't alone. "I'm almost done," she said loudly, hoping he could hear her. "I'll be out of here soon." As Anna returned to her work, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from her friend Jenna. "Hey, everything okay? Haven't heard from you all day." Anna hesitated before typing a reply. "I'm fine, just finishing up a job. This client is a little weird." Jenna responded almost immediately. "Weird how? Do you want me to come get you?" Anna stared at the screen, considering her options. Part of her didn't want to overreact, but another part of her wanted nothing more than to leave. Finally, she typed, "Maybe. I'll let you know in 15 minutes. When she stepped out of the bathroom, she nearly ran into Mark. He was standing just outside the door, his expression unreadable. "Sorry," he said, taking a step back. "I didn't mean to startle you." Anna forced a laugh, though it came out shaky. "No problem. I'm just about finished." Mark nodded, but he didn't move. Instead, he stood there, blocking her path. "You know," he said, his tone suddenly low and deliberate, "it's nice having someone here. This house can get lonely." Anna's throat tightened. "I'm sure it does," she said carefully, "but I really should get going." Mark didn't respond. For a moment, they stood in tense silence, and Anna's pulse quickened. Then, as if sensing her fear, Mark stepped aside. "I'll be downstairs," he said, his voice almost cheerful. Anna waited until he was out of sight before rushing to pack up her supplies. She grabbed her phone and texted Jenna again. "Please come now." By the time Jenna arrived, Anna was waiting on the porch, her supplies clutched tightly in her arms. Mark stood in the doorway, watching her with a strange intensity. "Thanks again for your help," he said as she hurried toward Jenna's car. Anna didn't look back. Later that evening, as she recounted the day's events to Jenna, Anna couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had been about to happen. Mark's behavior, the isolated location, the way he had hovered just out of sight, it all felt like pieces of a larger, more sinister puzzle. Anna never returned to Mark's house. and she eventually stopped taking jobs from Craigslist altogether. The memory of that day lingered, a chilling reminder of the dangers that can hide behind a friendly email. Her story stands as a warning. Trust your instincts and never ignore the voice in your head that tells you something isn't right. And there you have it, 3 chilling stories that show the darker side of Craigslist. What starts as a simple transaction or job opportunity can quickly spiral into something far more dangerous. These tales aren't just cautionary. They're a stark reminder that the internet, for all its convenience, is also a place where the unexpected can lurk. Whether you're buying, selling, or offering your services, it's crucial to prioritize your safety. Always meet in public places, bring someone with you if possible, and trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Remember, no deal is worth risking your life. If you found these stories as unsettling as we did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear these warnings. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more chilling tales and true horror stories. Stay safe out there, and until next time, thanks for watching.